Okay, abusia breaking news bi aba eno ena yede ato ye screen no so ede amamo no. Ose ayeka committee sitting on CJ Torkornoo case reject her request to make hearing public. Martin Amidu blast. Abusia suspended Chief Justice HSA audit to 5-member panel panel committee John Dramani Mahama say Ombra Omonfre Chief Justice Torkornoo net say Omontotuna no monye investigation on her petition no. Now we and Chief Justice Torkornoo at the two committee and him say enka ni hearing no enka omonye no public. Na Torkornoo edekoto omani no masa o ma ba to go say madam enye wo asema obeka enye wo na abekire say enye ne public ana asema me enye abusua enti we ni breaking news e wo a ye de ebremo na energy minister John Abujinapo edin sembi nso aba betuja about energy crisis mo me yanko na yanko nkotie ensema ono nso edetudwa edefa medamase.
As has been outlined today quite clearly and vividly by the Energy Minister. We'll be joined by an official from the Energy Ministry in a bit to answer some questions. Dr. Thuye Champong, who is also an economist and energy analyst, he is also a political risk analyst, is going to be joining us to have a conversation on it. But this is it. The Energy Minister says, and I'm going to show you the picture that he paints to us based on the information that he put out earlier today. Specifically, he says that the total debt that the energy sector is grappling with as we speak is over $3 billion. Remember, we are the IMF for this same amount of money to solve some other problems in this country. But the energy sector alone, the debt that has accrued to the sector is more than what we went to the IMF for, over $3 billion. That's what the Energy Minister says. That's not the only one. Quite apart from that, out of this $3 billion and in excess, the independent power producers, who are a major part of our energy generation in this country, without the IPPs who have all of these problems of shortfalls, as we're seeing, in terms of generation. The IPPs who are independent of the state, private sector people who have invested their money in generation plants and so on, have not been paid as well. The state owes them over $1.7 billion. And this $3 billion that I talk about is not inclusive of fuel cost. If you add the cost of fuel to this $3.1 billion in excess, that's going to go higher. And I'll show that to you, because according to the Energy Minister today, one of the IPPs, the Car Power Ship, they are owed $400 million. 400 million. And he says that in the next 3 days, if we don't pay them, they say they are going to shut their plant. What that means is that whatever Car Power is contributing to the grid in terms of the power generated will go off. And that would result in the doomsday situation that we've been talking about. In terms of the shortfalls, we talk about shortfalls in this instance. The Energy Ministry says ECG, that is selling the power or distributing the power, every month they are not able to collect about $2 billion of the power that they've distributed every month. That's power that is stolen, that ECG can't account for. Approximately 2 billion Ghana cedis every month. And that has resulted in, all things being equal, they projected by end of year, we're going to have to spend some 30 billion cedis just making up for the losses of ECG in terms of collection. They can't collect the power. Why is that? That's the question we'll be finding out. And what the ministry is doing about this. What measures they put in place to ensure that this 30 billion cedis that is projected to be spent on ECG in terms of their shortfalls, we will put measures in place to save that. Because it certainly doesn't make sense that if you're selling power, you're not able to retrieve. So what's the point? The minister says that in terms of the fuel that we have, it can last just 2.5 days. And that's why some fuel has been procured. But even the fuel that has been procured, he says we don't have the money to pay for it. That's how dire the situation is. This is John Jenapo earlier today. Take a look.
Honest assessment, and this is very honest. And I did say this even before the elections, that whoever won the elections was going to have a very tough time dealing with the energy challenges. Because last year alone, government spent over 24 billion cedis in energy sector, either you call it subsidies, under recoveries, or shortfalls. This year, it is estimated at over 30 billion in terms of the shortfall. Yesterday, we had a session with the finance minister, and a lot of the people here were there. We require about $1.1 billion to procure liquid fuels alone. Unfortunately, and the PRC is here, the liquid fuel is not part of the tariff structure. And so you would be buying close to $15 billion of liquid fuel, and that has to be paid by the central government because it's not part of the tariff structure. As if that is not enough, what you call the reserve margin, which is a necessity, because you just don't bring plants to meet exactly what you consume. What if one plant goes off for maintenance or any situation? That is not also part of the tariff structure. More importantly, the tariff itself, ECG, is unable to collect all the monies. And so you're having a deficit of about 2 billion cedis every month when it comes to ECG's collections. When you add that deficit and you add the fuel, which is not part of the pass-through, you are looking at over 30 billion. Car Power has just sent us a letter that by 18th, they will shut down the plant because we owe them more than $400 million. IPPs alone, we owe them $1.7 billion. And so it's serious. I must be frank with you, Chairman. Today, as I sit here, this morning, my headache is how to get the next parcel of liquid fuel. The fuel we have to take us 2.6 days. We've placed order for fuel, but it has to be paid. We've procured some fuel on credit and working with the Ministry of Finance to pay. But the truth is that the Ministry of Finance also has its limits. And so we'll be going to Cabinet to discuss how we can improve on the sector. And that is why we are pushing for some private sector participation in ECG's operations.
So that's an energy minister. Talk about the private sector participation in ECG operations, maybe as a way of solving this shortfalls that results in about 30 billion in excess that government will have to make up for. Joining us on Zoom right now is Richmond Roxon. He's a private legal practitioner, and also he is head of public affairs for the Energy Ministry, the Ministry of Energy. Also, Dr. Tio Champong is an energy analyst as well. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
Good evening, Alfred, and good evening to your cherished viewers.
Great. And I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Tio Champong. Hearing the minister outline how troubling the picture looks like. I mean, it couldn't have gotten any more troubling than what we're seeing now with all the shortfalls, the debt, and Car Power threatening, or no, not threatening, I mean, communicating their decision that they may have to shut down their plants in the next 3 days. Government has procured fuel, but there's no money to pay for it. How is this, I mean, really happening when there is a cash waterfall mechanism in place?
Troubling, but it's not new. You can actually go back several years, including during the handover, the notes that were shared. If you recall, in the early days of the administration, they had indicated that they needed some money to basically keep the lights on and monies that were owed across the entire value chain in excess of 2 billion USD. Similarly, in 2024, there were reports, some of them captured in news articles and both print and online media, of the likes of Car Powership and others threatening to shut down their power plants because they are owed money. So what I'm trying to basically say, these are legacy debt issues that have persisted in the sector. And every now and then the companies come up and ask for payment to be made. Part of that is settled, and then things go quiet for a while, and then it kind of resurfaces again. But fundamentally, the issue has to do with what is happening downstream with ECG not being able to collect all of the monies from the power that it buys, and the need to actually restructure or reform its operations. If that is not done, these problems would persist.
And talk about restructuring of ECG's operations. The minister ended what I just played with that thinking that's going on now. They're mulling the idea of a private sector participation as a way of addressing this. And he's been in power for 4 months, just a little beyond 4 months. Could anything have been done about this particular situation that we're faced with now?
No, the things that need to be done are systemic, they are structural. Both the minister, anybody working in the sector knows that you're not going to be able to fix the things in the energy sector overnight. Fundamentally, it rests on how we go about with the whole ECG private sector participation or privatization, exercise to be able to improve its collections. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why you buy something for 1 cedi and you're able to only collect 60 pesos worth back. That clearly is the problem, and that is something that has to be fixed. There are other issues related to how the tariffs, are set, and that one, as part of the IMF program that we're under, a number of reform initiatives are being done through that. But I do recall very well sitting during the National Economic Dialogue. I sat on the subcommittee that looked at the energy and looked at the cocoa sectors, and these issues clearly was known amongst many of the participants within the room, and certainly has been for several years now. In fact, you can go all the way back to 2012, 2013, when the World Bank issued a famous report on the country's energy sector. You can come to 2019 when we did the energy sector recovery plan and we put in the catch waterfall mechanism, but the monies were actually not fully paid into the CWM. And now we're actually implementing a version 2 of that same, ESRP with a similar set of issues. So what I'm basically trying to say is that the problems are deeply structural and they cannot be solved, overnight.
And that's where the issue is, and this is why I bring in Richmond Roxon, who speaks for the Energy Ministry. Mr. Roxon, so we hear the minister talk about the fact that we have just 2.5 days of fuel left. Exactly what does that mean, in practical terms?
In practical terms, Alfred, what it means is that the LCO that is available to power these power plants will not cover up to 3 days. This morning, when the minister met the Parliamentary Select Committee, which invited the minister for the sector and some agencies, the minister gave a briefing on the status of the energy sector as of today and made this disclosure. Fortunately, government has been able to secure 450,000 barrels of LCO to be able to power some of these plants. So even though it's a challenging situation, the government has been able to lead the discussions to ensure that this fuel is procured. It still comes down to funding. Like Dr. Champon also said, the challenge is that we have a tariff structure that does not take care of fuel. So ECG goes into selling of the electricity. One is unable to recover what it's supposed to recover. And number two, there are also other incidentals that are not included. So every now and then the states or the Ministry of Energy has to fall on the Finance Ministry to make provision for these fuels. That is not a sustainable model. There are structural differences that must be fixed. And that is why the minister currently is engaging cabinet to ensure that some of these reforms are made moving forward.
Well, but you talk about the 450,000 barrels of LCO that has been procured, and we understand it's expected to come through tomorrow, correct?
Yes, that's so. We expect it to be in tomorrow. The other conversation is to continuously speak to the finance ministry.
Yes, because I was coming to that, because it comes tomorrow, but then we haven't paid for it, so it's not like we can rely on it as a breakthrough, is it not? Because it's in, but we can't use it.
So there's commitment from the Ministry of Finance. It's just unfortunate that ordinarily this shouldn't be the model. Once you are selling power, you should be able to take care of all the incidental costs. But consistently, the Ministry of Finance has to step in. Last year alone, we spent over $1 billion in buying fuel alone for energy sector. If you add that $1 billion to the invoices received within the period or even the legacy debt, we are going into over $4 billion. And that is why the government has decided that it's looking at alternatives. What is the alternative to put in place a gas processing plant phase 2 to ensure that we spend less money on the fuels. For example, last year we spent $1 billion.
This is a broader payroll. I see, but then again, it comes back to the other issue that you raised, and what I touched on briefly, Mr. Roxon, about you referenced the ECG's situation and the fact that we sell power under normal circumstances, you're supposed to recover what you sell, right? But that's not the case. There's a shortfall of 2 billion cedis every month, and you're projected to spend about 30 billion cedis if things remain this way with ECG. So what are you going to do about it?
In the past few weeks, the minister has been engaging ECG to ensure that the needed reforms are made. Number one, cabinet has approved that all MDAs should pay for electricity that they use. The system where MMDAs go and then they use electricity at the end of the day, they don't pay. Cabinet has decided that no, that should not be the case. All MMDAs should pay. There's an exemption for some critical sectors. There are about 5. You look at the interior, you look at defense, you look at the presidency, health, and also education. Even under that, we don't have, it's not a blanket waiver where any institution that falls under these categories will not pay. What it will be is that some institutions, some agencies or institutions under these critical agencies will not pay. When you take education, for example, lecture halls will be covered. The dormitories will not be covered because the hostels and co will not be covered. So the government is expecting that these payments will be made. Once MMDA starts making payments, definitely we're going to see a major improvement in ECG's collection. The other thing is that the institutions that have been exempted, the Ministry of Finance is going to pay for their monthly electricity that they've consumed by using a portion of their budget for goods and services to make the payment. So this is a very, very critical intervention. If you look at Ghana Water Company, averagely they spend about 40 million Ghana cedis on electricity. For about 7 to 8 months, they haven't made any payments. This is unacceptable. If these monies were in, these monies could have been used to procure the fuels that we are looking at. So these are some of the interventions. Beyond that, the minister has also charged the Electricity Company of Ghana to ensure that their losses go down drastically. No business in the world will survive if you are looking at an average of 30 to 40% in losses. It's not practicable. And that is why the ECG itself has decided to put in place a number of measures to ensure that some of these inefficiencies are dealt with. So on a whole, It's a general problem. Largely, the sector is
Right.
the sector is challenged. Let me put it that way. And if steps are not taken immediately,
Well, but
at the end of it, we will not find a good energy sector. And that is why the minister is committed to this with the support of the president.
I see, but this path of asking MMDAs to pay for the power that they consume, we've been on the path before. I recall during the era of the late John Evans Atta Mills, he issued this directive that at the time, a number of the MMDAs had the post-paid meters. A directive was issued that prepaid meters should be installed there. That directive was carried out to a point, truncated. We know what the situation is now. So what are you going to do differently this time around to ensure that this directive is carried out?
It comes down to political will. And like I mentioned earlier, the minister is committed to this with the full support of cabinet and His Excellency, the President of the Republic. So at the end of the day, most of these MMDs are going to be on prepayment meters to ensure that they buy electricity. And like I said, those who are not going to be on those critical sectors that are going to be exempted, the finance ministry will pay. So it comes down to the commitment. And this time around, we are seeing a different level of commitment from the minister and the government.
I see, and I appreciate you. But Dr. Tia Champon, so maybe quickly before I let you go, in the end, all what people are expecting is that these issues are solved. Those who are buying electricity because we're using prepaid, we get power when we need it, correct?
We all want them to be fixed. Nobody wants to return to the doomsday days. Nobody wants, their power to be going on and off. But at the same time,
okay, abusunya wini ensema ekoso ewo political highway so eye Chief Justice Torkornoo 5-member panel committee ayete omo NHS are rejecting the request HSN ko person kaye bibia in public enye easy krabeda masese mo jepe ne kokoti sa audio no ere mai aha POG Media so bedamase.